Hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine. This is Sean Martin, your host, where I get to talk about all kinds of cool things with some cool people in the industry. And I'm thrilled to have a fellow Sean on the show. We both spell our name the same way. Sean Metcalf. How are you today, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Sean.
It's good to meet you. Good to have you on the show. Oftentimes I'm intrigued by stuff I see on. Probably spend too much time on social media, but it is work related. Most of the stuff I do, even if it's a recreational hobby that's work related, like music. But Sean posted a note the other day, 5 days ago. In fact, I'm looking at here, looking at the art of the honeypot account, and it's something. This is a topic that's interested me for a while. The idea that you can kind of see if somebody's inside and moving around and crossing and touching and looking at stuff that you might not want them to. And of course, you don't want them to actually find the real stuff. And that's the idea behind the honeypot. And that's hopefully Sean can explain it much more than I can, better than I can. But it's interesting because I think it's a different way to identify what's going on beyond just endpoint detection and response and those types of things. We're going to talk about that, and I think more specifically around identities and those types of things. So, Sean, thanks again for joining me. Maybe a few words about where you're up to. I think you've spoken at DEF CON. You do a lot of stuff for the industry. Who's Sean? What are you up to these days?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. I've spoken at a number of conferences in the past, including Black Hat, DEF CON, RSA, numerous B-sides. And most of what I focus on is Microsoft Identity Security. So basically Active Directory and Entra ID now. Entra ID was Azure AD. And so my focus is really on identity security and how we can better secure the identity, our Microsoft identity, because it's so prevalent out there as in the industry.
And I'm going to start off with maybe an odd question, or maybe it's super relevant, because we see a lot of talk about non-human identity. So how much of your brain takes up looking at machine identities or sensor identities or stuff that aren't necessarily humans, AI and agents and all that stuff? Is that a big part of the equation these days?
Well, from the perspective of non-human accounts that are service accounts in Active Directory or service principals and Entra ID, that is an issue because they have rights, they're highly permissioned, highly privileged, and they have abilities, and they don't authenticate like humans do. So therefore, there's additional protections that need to be applied around that, different understandings. One of the challenges that we've had in Active Directory for a number of years now that it's over 20 years old, over 25 years old, we have an issue with service accounts that have been out there for 5, 10, 20, maybe even 25 years. And people don't always understand what those service accounts are for, and they get left in highly privileged groups like domain admins.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff to look at there. So can we, and I'm sure we'll touch on that and maybe some scenarios or user stories or what have you, but I'm sure a lot of folks who listen to the show have some sense of what a honeypot is. As you're putting this article together, can you kind of frame the context of honeypots? I know there's honey nets, and then there's a honeypot for a file look different, or you have to treat it differently or think differently than a honeypot account. So you kind of paint that broad picture for us, and we'll get into some of the details.
Certainly. So we've all heard the saying before that attackers only have to be right once, defenders have to be right all the time or every time. Well, that may be true for initial access, the breach itself, but once the attacker gets inside the network and inside the environment, that actually flips around. So then now the attacker has to be right pretty much all the time, because if they misstep, then the defender is going to know that they're there. And the defender only has to be right once, knowing where that attacker is and what they're doing. And the best way to do that is to set up basically what Jessica Payne referred to as building the attacker's playground. So effectively setting up the environment so that way there's tripwires. There's things that you know that no one should ever access, no one should ever connect to, no one should ever open. And if it does open, if it is connected to, if it is used, then you know that that is an attacker, because there's no reason for any valid user in the environment to ever connect or use that resource. And so one of the things that's very important about the honeypot, either account or environment, is that it is something that it looks like everything else, but it's not.
And I guess that's a true. I played around with one. I don't have one set up now, but I played around with one a while back, and I think a lot of systems and services give you a template or a starting point. And in my mind, well, if that's the starting point, that all of them look the same to start with, then it's probably easier to spot from a bad actor's perspective. So how do we? Because there's some tips specific around the identity, that it's not a new account. If it's a service account, it actually looks like a service account, isn't just an empty fake account. So kind of talk to us what it means to set up an account that's non. I guess yeah, it's not easy to detect that it's fake.
So there's things that attackers are going to look for. They're going to look at the environment. They're going to enumerate highly privileged group membership to identify who are the admins in the environment. What are those accounts that might look like ideal targets? And so they're going to separate those into probable human accounts and probable machine accounts or service accounts. And the service accounts are very interesting because those typically have passwords that haven't changed in 5, 10, 15 years or more. And so therefore, the attacker has time to work on those. The human accounts may change their password every year. They may change their password every couple of years. They may change their password a couple times a year, but those are more likely to change. So going after the machine accounts with older passwords is something that looks like a juicy target to the attacker. If we're able to take an account that's been around for a while, maybe an old service account, and repurpose that as a honeypot account, we can identify if someone's attempting to log on with that account or if it's interesting to them. So one of the ways that we can do this is through a method that I published years ago, where it was about building a Kerberoasting honeypot. Kerberoast is an approach to I basically crack a password of a service account typically. That account has what's called a Kerberoast service principal name, which is effectively a pointer. So you have a service that's running on a server like a SQL database, and you want to be able to provide Kerberoast authentication to that SQL server. So you have to set up a service count, and with that service count, you tag it with a service principal name that's associated with SQL. So that way, when the user attempts to connect to that database, then the domain controller that's authenticating that user knows how to route them to that service and can complete the Kerberoast authentication. So one of the things that we can do is we can create an account as a service account, or again, repurpose an old one, make sure it has a service principal name on it that is for a server that exists on the network, but isn't really for what the purpose is for. So we want it to blend in. So for example, if all the applications are named after the Greek alphabet, like Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Delta, et cetera, the Echo, we want to make sure that those are what we're using. And maybe we use X-ray, maybe we use something different, maybe we misspell something in that, so that way it looks like the others, but it's not exactly the other. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a company. I have no association with the company, but Thinkst Canary, THINKST. They have canaries that can look like just about any server on the network and operate like them, and they just sit there and hang out. And when an attacker scans the environment, then you get an understanding that someone is doing something that they shouldn't. They're trying to connect to something that a valid user wouldn't. Thinkst also has a number of free Canary files and what they call honey tokens that can be placed on shares, placed in file system, can be placed in SharePoint and other places. So that way, if someone is connecting to a share that they shouldn't, they're opening up a file that they shouldn't, that something interesting or unusual is happening.
And is it so? If I didn't misunderstand, you create the account that not only looks and smells like, but it actually can connect to something and do something. So you actually get the authentication and then the access to either things device or a file or what have you.
Right. Yeah. An interesting approach would be to actually use a honeypot account that's associated with a thanks to honeypot server. That would be a very interesting approach.
So what else does let's speak to our CISO and security leader friends here. How does this fit into their bigger program from a detection and response perspective? How do they fold those events in, perhaps with some other access control events and whatnot?
Sure. Well, I think it's important at this point to also mention that there's a difference between honeypots and deception technology. So there is some technology that different companies have out there where effectively they create virtual instances of servers, virtual instances of users, virtual instances of groups, things that are not really in Active Directory but look like they are. And therefore, whenever the attacker attempts to connect to those or use or interact with those sort of virtual, I'm using virtual as they're kind of ethereal. They don't really exist, but they seem to be there. So therefore, the attacker's going after those. They're enumerating those along with the real ones. And so we know that there's someone doing something that shouldn't be doing something. The goal with a honeypot is that you only get one alert, or you only get a series of alerts when something bad is happening, when there's someone who is malicious, when there's someone who shouldn't be connecting to things that they shouldn't be connecting to. And one of the great things about using, for example, the Thanks Honey token, again, I have no association with them, is that you could actually set this up on shares and identify insider threat potentially. If someone is trolling around and looking for something they shouldn't, you could even create a file called passwords and have the Thanks Honey token associated with that. And when someone attempts to open up that file, then there's a beacon that goes out and informs the SOC that someone is connecting to something that they shouldn't, someone is doing something they shouldn't be doing. In the example of a honeypot account in Active Directory, someone is trying to interact with it. They're either trying to log on with it. You could put a fake password in the description field or another field on that account, which happens. You could even put a password file on a share and have that point to an account that you've created that you're using as this kind of multi-layered honeypot account. But the goal of the honeypot is that since it's not valid, since it's not something that's real, any connection to it or any use of that has, by definition, has got to be someone who has is not an authorized user, is not a valid user, is not someone that is doing something as part of the regular workday. So whether that's an internal person, so an internal threat, or whether that's some sort of external threat that is connected inside the environment, it's going to give us some interesting information depending on the source of this alert that's going to happen. How that user or a malicious user interacts with that system, we're going to get either one event or we're going to get several events that something is happening. And the benefit of this is we're going to know what the user account is that's being used, what computer account it's coming from, and of course the date and time stamp associated with that, along with some of that activity. And if we create a well-crafted SOP around that actual system, then we'll be able to identify when there's attack that's happening.
And so going about and setting up an account, I think there are probably ways to manipulate files and other things in terms of date, but is it easy to, because one of the first things, it's not a recently created account, is one of the points you make in your article on LinkedIn. Is that easy to do?
Sure.
Or do you have to resurrect an old one, or how do you get that first step?
Sure. So something is better than nothing. So you could absolutely just go ahead and create something, brand new account, go ahead and make it look like the others. However, it's better if it has some age to it. If there's a service count that's been around for a while, that's been decommissioned, why not resurrect that and use that in this for this purposes? Because we would be able to then identify if there's something happening on the network. What's interesting about security is that I came from the engineer architecture side of the house, where I was managing and administering and designing these systems like Active Directory itself. And with that, you really wanted to get to an 80, 90 95% solution, maybe even 100% if possible, because that's where you could show impact. On the security side, if you're able to move the needle 20% or 30% or 40%, that's great. In a situation I worked as a consultant with a company years ago, I actually helped them set up a Kerberoasting honeypot. So again, that service principal name that points to something that doesn't really exist, that's not valid. And when a pen tester came in the door and was working on their pen test, one of the first things they did was recon. They identified that there was this honeypot account that was part of these other accounts that were there that also had Kerberos service principal names, and they enumerated all of those. Well, we had detection set up for that, and once we identified and saw that that a number of accounts were enumerated from the perspective of which one had service principal names, and actually got a Kerberos service ticket for these different accounts. But more importantly, the one account that was the honeypot account, that was one of the ones that they also attempted to get a service ticket for. Again, since this is a honeypot account, there is no existing server that is associated with that, and no valid authorized user would ever be trying to connect to this server that we made up.
To reset the password so they can access it. So the act of enumeration can trigger,
right,
which is very early warning, right? So they're not even attempting to leverage the account yet. They've listed it.
Right. And there's another way to actually do that in Active Directory. You can actually set an audit configuration on a group like domain admins. And anytime someone accesses that and tries to enumerate it, you can get an event alert on that. So there are things you can do within Active Directory natively to enhance that. So you could even set up that account, that honeypot account, and set up auditing on it so that you could identify when someone actually interacts with that. Now, granted, that auditing event gets pretty large, and so in larger environments, that's not as feasible. But certainly in the smaller environments, these are things that can be done pretty easily, especially around a honeypot account.
And so on the note of scale or scope, is it important or necessary or not to have multiple honeypot accounts?
It depends on the goal. So you could definitely set up multiple honeypot accounts. You could have one that's set up with a Kerberos service principal name that doesn't point to a valid server. You could have another one which is basically just an account that's in, say, domain admins, and in a field on that account, like the description or the info or the notes field, you could actually put in a fake password for that account and then monitor for a bad password attempt on that account, because that's something, it looks too juicy to not try it. And so when we've done security assessments, we've identified an account that looked really like it was probably a honeypot account, because we have ways to look and really identify artifacts in Active Directory. And so we typically are able to identify a honeypot account. So we saw something that looked like it was a honeypot account. So we talked to the customer about it and said, hey, if this is a honeypot account, then everything's fine. If it's not, you have had someone that's put a password in a notes field or one of the fields in Active Directory for this account. And so it's not a good idea to have that there if this is something other than a honeypot account.
And other signals that I don't know, pen test teams and therefore bad actors are pen testing for different reasons.
Right.
Things they would do to or look for to spot honeypot accounts. So the examples you gave were to set them up in a certain way so that they look juicy and you want them to touch them, right? But are there things that you do like that could trigger or signal, hey, I'm in a place that has these honeypots set up?
Well, certainly if there's an account that's fairly new and it has a password in one of those notes fields, one of those like info or description field in Active Directory, that to me would stand out, and I would probably avoid that if I were a pen tester or an active attacker in the network. If I saw something that was 15 years old, That might be something that's more interesting. If I saw something that was 10 years old and it looked like a valid service account, it looked like it was connecting to or was set up for something else, it looked like it was something that was real. That's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to give it the same look and feel as the other accounts. So if all the service accounts are named SVC and then like Exchange or SVC LDAP or something like that, and there was an account that had a different name and was newer, that might stand out as something that maybe I don't want to touch. Maybe I want to stay away from that.
And would bad actors touch accounts that are not admin? I mean, I'm wondering if there's a value in setting up an account that isn't admin level, but still might be juicy. Is there an example there?
I think that you could. So the answer is yes and no, unfortunately. Admins are admins at different levels. So you have admins of Active Directory, you have admins of workstations, you have admins of servers, you have admins of SharePoint, Exchange, etc. So you could layer in different honeypot accounts at different parts of or different areas of the actual environment and how things are configured within that. You could layer that there. But those are typically going to be admins. Ultimately, attackers want access to data and they want to be able to persist in the environment. So where that data is where they're going to go. That's why attackers have pivoted a lot to the cloud, because that's where the data is. It's in SharePoint Online, it's in Exchange mailboxes, it's in OneDrive for Business shares and user environments. So that's really where the attackers are going. So if we can use a combination of honeypot accounts to help us identify when someone is interacting with an account or trying to connect to something that doesn't really exist, we could actually use honey tokens in some of these file shares, some of these systems, so that we can identify if someone is poking around in areas that they shouldn't.
So you mentioned the cloud, and I'm thinking of systems like Zapier, for example, that connects with a lot of services via the cloud. That and forgive me for my ignorance, but those are accounts connected through tokens. How does that look in the context of a honeypot? Is there a way to, I guess, if somebody's using Zapier, is there a way to see if somebody's coming in through one of the connected accounts using honeypot technologies around identities, or I don't know?
There may be. I'm not as familiar with Zapier from an administrative perspective. I understand that it provides a lot of automation. There are some things that you can do within, say, the Microsoft environment, like Entra ID. You could have something set up that is an admin account that has rights, but it's a little bit different because the enumeration is different for Entra ID versus Active Directory. In Active Directory, by default, everyone can see pretty much everything. With Entra ID, there's different levels of what can be seen by the attacker. So that part has to be adjusted for and taken account.
So in terms of trying to think what else we can touch on here, because setting up policies around this, is this kind of like public knowledge? Because I know a lot of organizations bring pen testers in. They run bug bounties. They want to disclose, not disclose, but I don't know. Is there a best practice around who knows that there are honeypots, or is it a special subset of the team that knows? Or
yeah, I mean, if you're going to have a honeypot account in say domain admins, then certainly your Active Directory admins need to know about this. They need to know what it is, and that you just leave it alone. It's an alerting account basically. And if you were layering this in other places, like in your Exchange admins group, then the Exchange admins group has to know that that's an alerting account. I've used the account name Joe Fox before as an alerting account, and so when I created that, I had to let people know that this is an account that will alert us if there's something going on. So just leave it the way it is. And one of the great things is when you have the conversation from security side with operations about these things, they can also say, hey, by the way, there's this one thing about that account that's different from the others. We should enable that or set that there as well so it looks the same as the others. So if you build that partnership between security and operations, jointly we can work together and actually have things that are better able to identify malicious activity because of that help of, hey, this thing looks a little odd. If we tweak this, then this will make it look better. Ultimately, we need to make sure that there's proper standard operating procedures, SOPs, that are at the SOC level so that when they see an alert associated with that account, they know what that means. That one should be triaged. That one should be raised higher and have be tagged as a higher fidelity type alert.
And you mentioned insider threats earlier, and I'm wondering, does the response, I presume it does, but does the response have to look different if it's from an internal user, a known user touching things, versus, obviously if they're authenticated in one, maybe authenticating to another honeypot account is not detectable cross account. But I don't know, is there, from an insider perspective, do they need to treat that differently from a response perspective?
I think the triage approach to it is the same, basically identifying and figuring out who is actually doing this activity. I call that kind of an internal external user. The external user, the attacker that is leveraging this account that they have been able to get a foothold on their computer, and they're leveraging that account to perform activity, to perform actions. So very much it'll look like the user is doing it, but they may have already left and gone home and just locked their workstation. So the triage perspective has to be done because there's a difference between that person has locked their workstation and gone home versus they are staying late and looking around for things, which is typical internal activity, because they stay late, they get in early, they poke around in things, they're looking at things that they normally wouldn't be able to or shouldn't be looking at. One of the biggest challenges that any environment has are shares that are open for more people than they should be, more than what's necessary. So it's very difficult to lock down a share to just the right number of people, just the right types of accounts, a grouping of accounts, so that they have access to it, but nobody else does. So a lot of times we end up with shares on in the network that are more permissive than they should be. So an internal user or even that external threat actor starts poking around and looking for things that are going to be interesting to them, because again, the insider threat is looking for data, as well as the external threat actor is looking for data.
Got it. So it's I don't know. It's fascinating topic for me. The whole deception and the trigger technologies we're talking about here, and I don't know that I'm interested in people listening and watching their thoughts on this. I don't know that it's widely used. I don't know if you have any insight into that as a mechanism for alerting. Do you think it's widely adopted as a
not as often as it could be, for sure.
Yeah. That's probably true for anything, I guess. But all right, well, Sean, anything else you want to touch on that we didn't get to?
No, I think we explored this pretty comprehensively. There's certainly a lot to it, and there's a lot of other technologies that are out there. But basically, I want to focus on what's free or cheap, easy to use. Really, it comes down to in Active Directory being able to leverage those accounts that you can create. And of course, that article, The Art of the Honeypot, is one article. I also have Detecting Kerberoasting, which is another one, which talks about how to use a honeypot account in order to detect that standard operating procedure for attackers. They are going to attempt to Kerberoast because they can take that ticket that they get, that service ticket, when they query those accounts. They're going to take that offline and attempt to brute force the password for it. So the older the password, the easier it is for them to basically crack that password that they're getting from that ticket. So the other thing that I have published is information about how to detect when password spraying happens. So password spraying is basically when an attacker takes a list of passwords and starts with the first one and attempts to authenticate as every user in the environment with that first password. And then they identify if that was successful on anyone. Then they move on to the second one, and they go through every user and tries to authenticate for that. And they might have some sleep time in between those where basically there's a pause. So they might try the first one and then go through all the users and then pause for 5 or 10 minutes and then go through the next ones and pause. So that way they don't trip up any bad account logon restrictions where basically the account would be locked out for a certain amount of time. And this enables the attacker to be able to get passwords for valid users on the environment without really tripping that issue where they get blocked to authenticate as that user. But there are event logs that happen with that, whether it's NTLM authentication, which is your standard bad logon attempt, or when they're attempting to use Kerberos, which will be actually under a Kerberos associated event ID. So I've published some information on that as well.
Well, if you can, I think have the art of the honeypot for sure. And looks like the Detecting Kerberoast article. I have the link for that. If you want to share any others that you've published that you referenced here, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. I'll share that with you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Sean, thanks for so much for joining me today and giving me some insights and hopefully some tips and tricks for folks who want to leverage this technology or this method, I should say, to help them find insider and external cruisers, if you will. And everybody listening and watching, thanks for joining me here on this episode. Hope to see everybody on the next one. Sean, I'll miss you in Vegas at DEF CON, yes. But for everybody else who's going to be in Vegas next week, please find me and say hi, and we'll see everybody rolling around.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks again.